Hey everybody, welcome to Grimm's Forge Gaming. Today we're going to cover kind of an alternative build option for Spartan Unleashed. And I would say this build is not going to replace our Spartan Unleashed 2.0. If you're looking for a build that can do open world and do BGs, I would definitely go that route first. But this one kind of gives you an interesting take because we're pushing almost 18k penetration, and so if you can get the jump on targets, this will burn them down very quickly. And basically what we're running into is if you're group queuing with some friends in BGs, maybe this might be a good build option for you. Right now it looks like it's the kiss of death if you get CC'd. Yeah, it's just so hard to break free from the CC, and you're dead before you know it. And so this build kind of feeds into that. You'll make sure that you get the CC on the target right at the jump, and you'll burn them down super quick. So anyways, I would that's kind of my disclaimer for this. We're going to jump right into the build. First set that we are running is Night Mother's Gaze, and Night Mother's Gaze is pretty interesting. Gives you weapon critical, weapon damage, and weapon critical. And then you see at the bottom, when you deal critical damage, you apply major breach to the enemy, reducing their physical and spell resistance by basically 6k for 4 seconds. And because we crit very often on this build, this 5 piece is going to be in effect. You're basically stripping that 6k from the target at all times. Now the alternative to this is just like our Spartan Unleashed 2.0. We're running Sword and Board, and right now you want to run Pierce, which applies major breach, and you're going to get like the 6k resistance breach, and then you're going to get minor too, which is another 3k. So it's an 8 to 9k resistance strip just by running Pierce. And for that reason, I say that's why I like Spartan Unleashed 2.0. Check that out. But the nice thing about this is this build is all about burst and all about speed, and the quicker we can get to our rotation, which is Power of the Light, Toppling Charge, and then hitting them with jabs, the quicker they're going to die. And so this works really well paired with the stuns set. And the situation with stuns is we've got some weapon or spell damage, some penetration, and more weapon damage. And then at the bottom, when you deal damage to an enemy who is off balance, your physical and spell penetration is increased by 5100. So it's important to know that that 5 piece is not labeled as minor breach, major breach, anything like that. It's just an additional 5100 resistances stripped from the target. And so if we jump on a light armor target, we will overpen on them. What I mean by that is they'll have 0 resistances, because we'll be hitting them for 17k plus 20% because we have them all. And you can kind of look at, we're just going to look at this real quick and then we'll jump into it. But I have an add-on that shows me extended stats here. But our physical penetration, because the CP is 6,500, almost 6,600, right? And then plus 20% because we're using a 2-hand maul. Or I guess you could say 20% plus that, right? Because the maul bypasses 20% of their armor. And then I guess it adds the additional penetration reduction. And so if you were to add those 2 armor sets, if you were to add the Night Mother's Gaze set here, we've got 5,948, and then you were to add this additional pen, 5126, on top of the penetration here. Just that base number is 17,671 penetration. And most regular mobs in the game have 18k resistances, and so like down in Imperial City, you can see our recoveries are really low, but it doesn't matter the way this build plays down here. There's mobs all over the place, so you can repent them and keep gas in the tank no problem. I'd say if you're going to take this build into BGs, you definitely want to switch from the Warrior Mundus Stone. We're using Warrior and Witch Sugar Skulls food, but the Warrior Mundus Stone, come off of the Warrior and go with the Serpent. That's an extra 300 stamina recovery if you're going to do BGs with this build. Right now, CP Imperial City is a lot of fun on the build, and it plays very fast. But anyways, we are running the Ring of the Wild Hunt, mostly because Templars are considered notoriously slow class, right? And I like to keep the Swift trait on the Ring of the Wild Hunt, so that way we've got that extra 7% movement speed. And so you can see at the bottom, increase your movement speed by 15% while in combat, and so you add the other 7% from the Swift trait. That's 22% additional movement speed in combat. Increase your movement speed by 45% while out of combat, and then you add the 7 there, so 52% additional movement speed out of combat. Now, if you wanted to make this infused, you could get some more weapon damage, and you could also not run these Hell Terrain poisons that I'm currently running. However, I feel like Stamplars are in a position where they need some additional healing, so that might be the play. Another thing too is if you're going to be doing duels on this build, I would take Ring of the Wild Hunt off. I would not put Malakath on there because you need crit damage to trigger this. I would actually put the Ring of the Pale Order, and so that way all the biting jabs damage and damage that you're doing, you're going to have additional heals coming in. You could also run the Torque of Eternal Constancy on this build if you wanted for like additional recoveries, which you could see that we were low on the recovery side of things, so the Torque might be a nice way to go. Or you could just run a monster set, put Balorgs here, get that additional weapon damage and get that additional pen there, and then you're definitely over penning on people, so basically stripping all their resistances. So we're running two-hand maul, and it is Nirnhone on the front bar, and then on the back bar we're running sword and board, and I do have Nirnhoned one-hander, and we've got the reinforced shield. Now, if you wanted to make this defending, you could, because a lot of things on your back bar are block cast capable, and what we mean by that is you could actually hold block on my back bar, and every ability you can see that our sigil doesn't drop. So we're blocking through all of that. So that's pretty nice. Right now I'm running Helm of the Trainee, and you see it comes in training. I don't want to spend any transmute crystals to change that, but basically we have that just because we want to get our health a little higher. And we are running prismatic enchants on everything, and I don't have any armor sets golded out, and we're running infused weapon damage on these two items and Swift on that one. So that's all the items right there. You can see that we are prismatic enchants on everything, and we're running in pen on everything except for the helm, which comes in training, and that is awesome. So okay, that is that. Let's look at the stats here. Skill delay. Alright, you can see that our spell resistance on our two-hand bar is 31,000, and our physical resistance is 30,000. That's really good for a medium armor setup. Crit resistance is going to be at 2,600, and then like I said, we already talked about the pen on there. We told you that the food is the Warrior, or if you're doing BGs, you want to go Serpent, and we're doing Bewitched Sugar Skulls for our food. Basically, it's because our magic recovery is so low, and we needed to bump up our max magicka. The reason being is a really easy way on a Templar to get people off balanced is to use toppling charge. So this is our gap closer. It's not going to do a whole lot of damage because it scales off our magic. You know, it's a Magplar ability, and we're a Stamplar, but it just gives us a guaranteed off balance as long as they're off of CC immunity. And so gap close to them, set them off balance, and start putting some jabs into them and absolutely eat their face. Biting jabs there, and then I run reverse slice. I like the splash damage, and I've got tons of video of me putting pressure into people, get one person low, start going into execute phase, and that splash damage it starts hurting everybody around him. Power of the Light is our damage modifier, and this also gives us access to Minor Breach, so, which I forgot to add into our numbers there. So basically we're going to be, that's another 3k pen, so we're at 20k penetration on this build, and I'll make sure the thumbnail represents that properly. Yeah, so 20k pen is pretty ridiculous, and we'll run into a heavy armor wearer, and if they're at resistance cap at 33k, this build is going to hit them like they have 13k resistances, so it definitely chops through people. So the whole question is, can you handle the recoveries, right? And but it's been interesting for what it is, like bursting people down. Pretty fun. I'm running Rally, and if you wanted to run Forward Momentum for a snare removal, you can. However, we need the burst heal from this, and it also gives us minor endurance, which is nice. And I run Berserker's Rage on this. You can run Dawnbreaker Smiting if you want. You'll get a little extra weapon damage because of the Fighter Guild passives and stuff like that, and you'll get a guaranteed CC, you know, as long as they're off CC immunity from Dawnbreaker Smiting, it'll stun them, and it's a conal effect. However, Berserker's Rage hits everybody, and this will get up to almost 16k tooltip. You could hit 5k weapon damage on this build, by the way. Infuse this ring, add weapon damage, and then put a weapon damage glyph there, and because of medium armor scaling, you'll hit 5k weapon damage. So that would be no problem. But anyways, yeah, just shy of 16k on the Berserker Rage. And if you've never used this before, this attack ignores the target's resistances, granting you physical and spell resistance equal to the amount ignored from the initial target for 8 seconds. You are immune to all disabling, snare, and immobilization effects for the duration. And that's the pretty cool part about this. Fairly low cost at 142 ultimate on a Templar, and Dawnbreaker will be less than that, but and as long as they don't cleanse the dot on Dawnbreaker, Dawnbreaker ends up being about double the damage with the additional dot damage afterwards. But Berserker's Rage is pretty cool because the whole thing about this build is I need to be able to get a full rotation of jabs off on them with Power of the Light going, right? I need to hit that toppling charge and be uninterrupted and just lay into them, right? Berserker's Rage allows me to do that because I'm immune to all disabling effects, snares, and immobilization effects for the duration. So that's great. For 8 seconds, it allows me to freely work on them. It also bypasses their resistances, which is great. This build, they don't really have resistances anyways, right? We're chopping through all of that. But for 8 seconds, basically, I can just work for free and not worry about being CC'd. I just got to stay on them. And that's what's been helping get those kills. They basically have no resistances, and we're able to just free cast on them for 8 seconds, and they're trying to CC us, or they try and heal through it, and it's just way too much burst chopping through them. So it's been interesting. On the back bar right now, we're running Elude and Shroud Yourself in a Mist to gain major evasion, reducing damage from area attacks by 20% for 30 seconds. That's nice. While this effect is active, when you take damage from a direct area of effect attack, you gain major expedition for 5 seconds, increase your movement speed by 30%. And so we are already moving fast with the Ring of the Wild Hunt on the build, and then when Elude, when this triggers, now all of a sudden, instead of moving like 22% faster additional movement speed while in combat, now we're moving at 52% additional movement speed while in combat. So strafing around or getting to our enemy's backside and continuing to put pressure into them is pretty easy. Tooltip on a Resolving Vigor gets up to like 16k, not counting major mending, and we'll hit about 20k on that. So it's not too bad, but for being our primary heal, it's still just a heal over time, right? And so between this and Rally, we end up needing Rally for that burst heal. Repentance is nice if there's mobs dead in the area. And so down in the sewers, that's pretty easy. Up in the districts, if you're very cognitive of where the corpses are, you can actually stay in a extended fight with this on this build. But you need to use those corpses, you know, to have those extended fights. The whole purpose of this build is that they not be extended fights though, right? Like you want to burn somebody down and move on to the next, burn them down, move on to the next, and then hopefully nobody's standing by the time you hit the bottom of the tank and you're having to channel some heavy attacks. But pretty fun build for sure. Extended Ritual, we've got some health coming in from this, and then this is our Purify. So when we get all these dots on us and all this you know, proc sets and all this crap in the game, the Extended Ritual is going to help. And because our magic recovery is so low on this, this is not something that you want to spam. But if there's stuff that you absolutely need to get off of you, definitely use it. Restoring Focus, this is going to be our armor buff. And then you can see there you also receive 240 stamina every 1 second. And because recoveries in this game are based off of 2-second increments, this ends up being about 480 stamina recovery, additional stamina recovery. And so that's something important to know. You got an extra 480 stamina recovery as long as your rune's down. And then standing inside your rune increases your physical resistance, spell resistances by 50%. And so we'll show you the resistances on the back bar here. All right, we got 34,000, almost 35,000 spell resistance, and then 34,000 physical resistance. So 50% damage mitigation. We are at cap. That's great, and pretty good stuff. And you can see because we don't have a maul on our back bar, we lost that plus 20% penetration. You know, we just basically have the pen from our CP allotment. So there is that. And let's look at one other thing here. This is our resistances with Potion Pop. You get an extra 40%, 772 Magicka, 1200 health recovery, and then 992 plus the 480 stamina recovery. And really that's kind of what makes this tick, is that extra 480 from standing, or from our rune, defensive rune that we put down. Now, like I said, you're going to do BGs, or you need more stamina recovery, come off the Warrior Mundus Stone and switch to Serpent. Let's jump into the CP and we are done. First thing, we've got 2 points into Siphoner. It gives them 1 extra thing to cleanse. And then we've got 51 points into Warlord. We are going to be CC'd and then we'll be killed. Because you can't currently break free in the game, rip. And 64 points into Mooncalf for an extra 13% stamina recovery, 43% into, or 43 points into magic recovery for an extra 10%. I got 49 points into health recovery for an extra 11. If you wanted to go tenacity, you could channel in some heavy attacks, but the thing about tenacity on a Stamplar that I was kind of thinking about was the biting jab cast duration is so long, so you should be light attack weaving between those jabs, but it's just a long time between the light or heavy attack, so tenacity you'd get less out of it as opposed to health recovery. So 61 points into tumbling. We are more tumbling centric than we will be Shadow Ward, standing and holding block. Now I did say that the back bar is completely block cast capable. That's fine, but we're only doing that while we're reapplying our buffs and then going back to the offensive. So nothing here in Apprentice. We've got 61 points into Master at Arms. It's going to increase our damage done with direct damage attacks, which is nice because maybe earlier this year they had officially changed like sweeps and jabs to be considered direct damage, even though it's an area of effect or a conal effect in front of you. So putting points into this increases your jab's damage, and no longer putting points into this. So 61 points into precise strikes are critical damage and critical healing, and this is pretty nice on this build. Like I said, we're not going to run Malakath on this band. It wouldn't, or on this build, it wouldn't make sense with the armor sets. And 84 points into piercing. This is the theme of the build. We want to chop through people, and like I said, we're almost at 20k pen. 64 points into mighty, and that gives us additional physical. We've got 77 points into medium armor focus for an extra 5k physical resistances, and we got 35 points into spell resistance. So Templars have a passive that gives them spell resistance, so you can run a little less here, but the 77 is needed. Basically, that's how we are running a medium armor build with near cap resistances on our two-hand bar. Like, we're over 30k resistances on two-hand bar, and then we exceed cap on our sword and board bar. And so we're very beefy and very bursty. 61 points into Ironclad. That's been working out really well, negating direct damage. And then we've got 18 points into Resistant for an extra 500 crit resistance. 15 points into Hardy, 15 points into Elemental Defender, so we got 30 points total. So we get the Bulwark passive. Gives us an extra 1500 resistances when we're on our sword and board bar. This is actually how we hit resistance cap, is this thing right here. And I've said it in previous videos before why I prefer to go this route as opposed to going heavy here and getting Unchained passive. Number one, you're not going to be able to break free anyway, so darn it. Anyways, you're not going to be able to break free anyways, and when you do, it's terrible. But I'm not worried about this. I know that if somebody hits me with a Pierce or Major Breach right now, our resistances are just gone. And so I'd rather get my resistance totals up higher and be more beefy. And somebody will say, you know, they'll talk about, well, the damage mitigated. Yes, the damage mitigated, but I'd rather, after somebody applies Major Breach to me, I would rather have, before they apply Major Breach, I'd rather have really high resistances. They apply Major Breach, I now lose 9k resistances, right? That, I like that alternative as opposed to having medium to low resistances, but I'm getting an extra 4%, you know, damage mitigation. Well, if I've got 20k resistances and somebody hits me with Pierce, I basically have, if I have 20k resistances, they're stripping me of 9k resistances. I now am on a medium armor build with 11k resistances, and that's why you just get absolutely chopped down. Your character will die, and you'll be jumping around thinking you're still alive, and it'll all catch up. So 49 points in a quick recovery and increase the healing received by 11%. So that's CP on here. Just kind of an alternative to the Spartan Unleashed. This is a armor pen type build, and if you wanted to hit 5k weapon damage on it, you could, and it's fairly beefy. Another thing too, somebody brought this up just before we close, for those of you that are still here. Not a lot of people stay through this. They hear the armor sets and then they move on and they miss things like this. But so obviously our resistance caps are going to be like 33, 34k. When you hit this on a target and it takes their resistances, I have screenshots. If you go watch the Spartan Unleashed 2.0 video, when you hit this on somebody, if they're a tank, it takes their resistances. So we're already basically at cap on this guy, 30k. We'll say we're at 30k and they're at 30k. We hit them with this, and now we take their 30k. We're going to have 60k resistances. Yes, I know that cap is only 33,000, but the important part of that is we will not be penetrated. Like, they will not be able to strip those resistances unless they're using corrosive armor or something like that, but that bypasses it. But for that moment, even if they hit us with major breach. They hit it. It doesn't matter what they hit us with unless it's corrosive and it bypasses our armor, right? Or they hit us with one of these, you know, it ignores the target's resistances. They'd have to hit us with this. If they hit me with a Dawnbreaker or anything like that, it's going to be going verse 100% resistances. Okay, and so that's why I like that. And if you've ever used Berserker Rage before, when you hit this on people, I know there's a resistance cap, but you feel really beefy when you're using this. Like, you hit this on people, and I might have only been 1k away from hitting cap, but now all of a sudden I feel really stout. So give this a look and see what you think. Anyways, that's the build here. We're just going to call this Spartan Unleashed penetration build, and everybody be safe out there. Thanks.